Greetings to one and all. My name is Khemendra Kumar and I'm from Fiji. The title of my paper is My 21 Years in the Fiji Islands, a Review. Totaram Sanadhya-The Fiji Dwip Memory Ikkis Varsh, later translated as My 21 Years in the Fiji Islands, is the first book written by an indentured laborer or girmitiyas in Fiji. The book encompasses the author's first-hand experiences and anecdotes from the point of view of an Indian. As a result, Sanadhya's book counters many Western biases generally highlighted in history texts about the indenture system. For the scholars of diaspora, this book provides insight into why many Indians chose to indenture themselves and eventually became part of our diaspora. This paper seeks to review and highlight the major threads of my 21 years in the Fiji Islands. The main threads are treachery used in recruiting laborers, unfair and unjust treatment, social and moral degeneration, and racism suffered by the girmitiyas in the Fiji Islands. Introducing Sanadhya, the man of the people. John Kelly, the co-translator of My 21 Years in the Fiji Islands, introduces the book by stating its uniqueness. The book gives special insights into the Girmit experience and history. He introduces the translated edition by asserting, while a great number of books have been written about the indenture system and the lives of girmitiya laborers in Fiji and elsewhere, only this one was written at the time of indenture, from the Indian point of view and from the first-hand experience of the life of the girmitiya in Fiji. Kelly qualifies Sanadhya as a remarkable man. After completing his indenture, he fought for the rights of his fellow girmitiyas. Upon his return, Sanadhya devoted his life to abolish the indenture system. His departure from Fiji was a significant event that received attention in the Pacific Herald. This rare mention was a feat of a man otherwise reduced to Coole status by colonial apparatus. For Banarsidas Chaturvedi, Sanadhya was highly respected by his countrymen in Fiji for his noble deeds. Sanadhya revived Sanatana Dharma amongst Hindus. Also, he wrote to Mahatma Gandhi and requested him to send a barrister to represent Indians in Fiji. To bring Dr. Manilal, a barrister, Sanadhya went on foot from one plantation to another to collect funds. As an esteemed religious leader, he organized the first Ram Leela festival in Navua. As a political leader, he sent the telegram of support from Fiji Indians for Rajarishi Gokhale's resolution before the Indian Legislative Council to end the indenture system. When he returned to India, he traveled widely to speak against the indenture system. The birth of my 21 years in the Fiji Islands. In writing the book, Sanadhya aimed to expose the evils of the indenture, to make the frequent appeals of the reader, to address them directly, and to try to shame them to action. His target audience were the educated, influential, intellectual Indians in India. Due to this slant, the book falls in the category of testimonial and polemic writing. In a nutshell, My 21 Years in the Fiji Islands is a source of insight into Fiji's indenture system and the girmitiyas within it. It reflects the truth from the girmitiyas' point of view, the reality of the time as perceived by the system's participants. Sanadhya, poverty and recruitment. Totaram Sanadhya was born in 1876 in Firozabad. His father, Pandit Revati Ramji, died 11 years later in 1887, leaving him, his two elder brothers, and his mother in poverty. In late Victorian Holocaust, Mike Davis states that pauperization accompanied modernization and commercialization in India. Poverty forced poor Indians far and wide in search of work. Indenture became an option for survival. Like so many others, Sanadhya, at the tender age of 16, left home to search of work in 1893. In a market near Katwali, he met an Arakati who asked if he wanted employment. Upon agreement, the man said, "Good, I can get you a very good job is the sort of work which will make your heart joyful. This Arakati, with his sugar-coated words, brought Sanadhya to a safe house. The Arakati explained, "The place where you will work, you will never have to suffer any sorrows. There will never be any kind of problems there. You will eat a lot of bananas and a stomach full of sugarcane and play flutes in relaxation." After 3 days, the Arakati brought them to a magistrate. The Arakati in advance coached them to say yes to any question, otherwise they would be sent to prison. After affirming yes to the magistrate, an immigration officer rounded them up and said, "You are going to Fiji." What is Fiji? It is heaven. Brutality, violence, and injustice, an integral part of Girmit narrative. Girmit is generally perceived as a time of hardship and abasement for the Indian laborers. The indenture system was likened to a new milch cow or a new system of slavery by critics such as Hughes Tinker. While Burton sums up the girmitiya perception that life in the lines were hell. The harshness and brutalities of the Britishers are vividly highlighted by Sanadhya. The Hindi word atyachar denotes atrocities and outrages. Brutality, beatings, and violence became part of Coole life. Coole emphasizes that the notion of atrocity or outrage one finds expressed here extends quite beyond the violence itself. Outrageous events such as the case of Kabuli Pathans or the violence on Naraini demonstrates the injustice at the hands of European authority figures. Coole lines, a hub of social and moral degeneration. Many observers of Girmit record a degeneration of Indian social and moral order in the Coole lines. The caste system did not survive in Fiji. To a certain extent, it is true that the Indians broke the bonds of rigid system and moved from ascribed social roles to freedom. But Sanadhya affirms that it was not one-sided attempt. The rigid plantation hierarchy and the imposed Coole status by the British officials forced the violations of their caste. Deliberate attempts were made so that the Indians were brought to contact with sources of pollution such as eating, drinking, and clothing. Protest over these matters led to hostility and punishment from the British authorities. As a result, the Indians were made into a new kind of people, forced into a new lowest social status called coolies. Kabuli Pathan, divide and rule. 60 Kabuli Pathans were recruited and sent to Fiji. The Kabuli Pathans were unaware of the type of work and the conditions in Fiji. As usual, the planta provided the same provisions to each of them. Unfortunately, their ration finished within 3 days. When asked to work, the Kabuli Pathans requested food instead. Instead, their planta reported to police that they were refraining from working. The planta also reported that the Kabuli Pathans threatened to loot and kill them. The police came right away. Although the Kabuli Pathans explained the situation, the police sided with the planters. Police later fired a gun to frighten them, but the Kabuli Pathans remained steadfast. After some discussion amongst the planters and the police, the Kabuli Pathans were led to the Nukulau depot, where they were given food. As they were about to eat, a whistle was blown, and suddenly 500 or more native Fijians with weapons rounded them up, caught them, divided them into groups, put them into dinghies, and sent them to different plantations. This act of betrayal was a collusion with the planters, police, and the immigration department. Native Fijians were used to carry out the dirty deeds of breaking the strength of the Kabuli Pathans. The rape of Kunti. Kunti and her husband were from Gorakhpur. She was in her early 20s when a Sardar and an overseer tried to destroy her virtue. She was tasked with cutting grass far away from all the other girmitiyas. The Sardar and the overseer attempted to rape Kunti, but she escaped by jumping into a nearby river. Her plantation owner ignored Kunti's complaints. Instead, she received an extra task of weeding, and her husband was beaten half dead. Through some means, her story was published in Bharat Mitra. The government of India noticed this account and asked for an investigation of the incident. In Fiji, an immigration officer threatened Kunti, but she was steadfast on her version. The perpetrators eventually escaped punishment. The above event highlights how the Sardars, overseers, and planters conspired to abuse the girmitiyas. Naraini, the maid woman from Navo. Naraini's story is equally heart-wrenching. She worked in Nandi district at Navo plantation. A child was born to her who died. According to the government law, a woman should rest and recover for 3 months after giving birth to a child. Just 2 or 3 days after she gave birth, an overseer ordered her to work. When Naraini refrained, she was beaten till she fell unconscious. A white sub-inspector investigated the incident and brought Naraini to the hospital. The overseer was arrested, and the case reached the Supreme Court. In the end, the white overseer was found not guilty and freed. The suffering of childbirth, the death of a child, beatings by the overseer, and eventual defeat at the hands of law led Naraini to madness. Racism and third-class treatment. Racism was rife in Fiji. Just like Gandhi suffered at the hands of whites in a train in South Africa, Indians in Fiji had to endure similar hardships on steamers. On one occasion, Sanadhya was forced to sit with pigs and other animals. At night, it began to rain. He was soaked and shivering with cold and fever. He even offered to pay full fare and get into a room, but his request was denied. Many Indians suffered similar treatments as Sanadhya. In conclusion, in writing my 21 years in the Fiji Islands, Sanadhya has highlighted the ills of the indenture system in Fiji from the subaltern's point of view. The main threats are treachery used in recruiting laborers, unjust and unfair treatment, social and moral degeneration, and racism suffered by the girmitiyas in Fiji. Sanadhya makes a compelling case that girmit in Fiji was far from what was promised of Fiji, a heaven. Instead, for many of them, it turned out a hellish experience. This book gives insight into what the girmitiyas went through in Fiji. That is the end of my presentation. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.